one of the number one challenges, aside from not doing any marketing at all, that I see when it comes to agency owners is that they will not stay consistent in their own lead generation efforts, and they will give up too fast. Some of it may have been that they just were doing the wrong channel in the first place that ultimately wasn't going to have the impact that they were looking for, and so it just actually doesn't work, or they just didn't give it enough time. Hey everyone, today I wanted to talk to you about something that's really crucial for your growth. And that's ultimately, how do you go about selecting and figuring out exactly where should you be marketing your agency so that you can bring in the number of leads that you need. And there's an incredible amount of options out there. And so it's incredibly easy to feel overwhelmed or tempted to spread your efforts incredibly thin that ultimately doesn't allow for you to have the impact that you're looking for. So choosing the right channels isn't actually about being everywhere. It's about being where your ideal client already spends their time, ultimately where their eyeballs already are. Today, we're going to talk about developing your clear client personas, your ICPs, and understanding the key metrics that you need to be looking at, conversion rates, your acquisition costs, and all of those things that allow for you to really be able to understand where you should be putting your attention and focusing your lead generation efforts, allowing for you to understand the timeline that it is going to take for you to be able to get to the ROI, the number of leads that you're looking for, and making smarter decisions in what it is that you're doing. We're then going to talk about some different channels and the varying amounts of time and effort and money that it's going to take for you to be able to derive the results that you're looking for. So let's start with the kind of overarching kind of base principle here, is that why is it that selecting the right channel specifically matters? Because my opinion generally is that the vast majority of marketing does work. And the number one thing that I see happen with a lot of small businesses and agencies specifically is that you're trying to do too many things and you're trying to be everywhere. Either that or you start doing one type of marketing and then a month in or 2 months in, you don't actually get the results that you're looking for. One, you didn't focus enough of attention and time to allow for it to derive the results. And then two, the expectation going in of how long it was going to take for you to be able to get those results ultimately were a false expectation that results in you not being able to have the impact that you're looking for. And then you end up giving up. And consistency is incredibly valuable. I'm going to just talk about this from my own experience. So when I first started working in deriving and generating leads and my own marketing in the first place, is I took the approach of the throwing spaghetti at the wall approach, really. And I was doing everything. And it resulted in me feeling incredibly exhausted. And there were so many different pieces of what we were ultimately doing. And I didn't have the support, the team that I needed in order to be able to do that much marketing activity. And ultimately, I was doing everything, but really badly, really, to be honest. And what I recognize ultimately is that if I were to focus my attention on one specific channel and actually focus on the tiny little nuances within everything that I was doing, that I can really be able to make a meaningful difference. And so I'll kind of talk through my journey here for a moment in lead generation and how it was able to get to a place where it was meaningfully impactful. So to start off with, like I said, I was doing everything. And what I then realized is that I needed to really be very clear on what type of messaging is ultimately working. There was a load of different ways that I can approach the conversation in my own lead generation. But the thing that I really needed to figure out was what was actually deriving the attention. What were the pain points that ultimately were the ones that I had assumed and then the ones that were in my ideal clients, agency owners' heads at that point. So the way that I went about it was a load of testing to begin with. And so I was doing cold email outreach at this point. That was the predominant lead generation channel that was bringing in leads aside from referrals. So the way that I went about it is that I would write an email multiple times a week, and I would write 2 different versions of it with slight augmentations between each. So as an example, augmentations would be the subject line. It would be a slight change in the preview text. It would be the initial email hook that was going in. I was just going through to try to understand exactly what ultimately was allowing for me to be able to have the impact that I was looking for, measuring each different piece of this type of marketing channel. At the time, open rates were a lot more valuable. So what were my open rates? What were my click rates? what were my response rates, what were my meeting rates, and being very clear and understanding, well, if I did this change, it had this impact to the KPIs that I was looking at, and then starting to then test it with loads of different people. And so I would do the 80 for the 20 rules. Like, here's the thing that I know is working right now. Let me continue to test things outside of this known impactful method or strategy and see whether I'm able to beat the incumbent really in that regard. And so I was learning a couple of things here. One, making sure that I was paying attention to the minutia within each one of those different pieces of KPI, recognizing that the actual funnel going all the way down from the number of emails that I was sending out to the open rates, to the click rates, to the reply rates, to the meeting rates, that I was watching each one of those different points of fall off of how can I improve that specific KPI, allowed for me to be able to put the attention to where it needed to be and ultimately make more meaningful impact. The thing that I realized throughout this process was that the more that I actually made that 1-2% improvement in each different stage of the funnel, I didn't need to just increase the volume that I had to be in front of, that the more effective this strategy became at each different stage of the funnel, each different one of these KPIs, and I was able to make that 1-2% improvement in open rates, to click rates, to reply rates, to meeting rates, that I was able to make a significant impact to the number of leads that I was able to generate. That learning lesson from a messaging perspective then translated into our ad strategy, to books that we've written, to all of those sorts of stuff that allowed for us to be very clear on how do we communicate in a way that allowed for us to be able to have the impact that we're looking for in each one of our different marketing channels. And the thing that I want to just be very clear here is that the right channels, when you are utilizing the right channels, can really amplify the message that you're putting out there. And the wrong ones can really be a significant waste of time and ultimately money. And, as they say, time is money, and ultimately is, because that's the most finite resource on the planet, really, is that we only have so much time here in life. So it's incredibly expensive to be spending it in the wrong area. And not that I want to put an abundant amount of pressure on you to make sure that you're selecting the right channel, but recognizing that it is important that we go in with the right expectation, the right understanding that we are going into the right place, and then focusing enough attention and enough time there to allow for it to have the impact that we're looking for. I mean, obviously, I'm speaking to a lot of branding agencies and all of that, and the ideal client profile is paramount here, obviously, and making sure that we understand where they are. And so the distinction, just kind of bluntly putting it, is that a white collar worker and a blue collar worker ultimately engage very differently. A enterprise company versus a small business also engage very differently. Decision-making criteria is different. Who it is that we need to be reaching out to is different. The timelines to making choices are different. The length of time that they are thinking about strategy is different. And recognizing that these different pieces are vitally important, the way that they actually see the world. And so when you start to think about, and here's the thing that I see happen in a lot of instances, it's that the whole idea that the cobbler's kids has no shoes or the shoemaker's kids has no shoes, is that for agencies, you're not actually slowing down enough to allow for you to be able to have the impact that you're looking for, and being clear on that client persona, and not just, here's the amount of revenue that they're making, and here's their ages, and here's their titles, but the actual psychographic profile of this individual. What are the things that they are saying to themselves at night? What are the things that are keeping them up at night? What are the things that they're looking to personally accomplish? Whether you're working to be able to target an enterprise customer or a small business, is that ultimately you're still selling to people. And those people's personal objectives, their personal dreams, play a huge important role here. And understanding where they're spending their time now is incredibly important, to even just what social media platform, based on that specific demographic profile, where they're spending their time, to are they utilizing industry forums? Are they spending a lot of time reading industry publications? Are there professional networks that they're part of? And are they really active trying to solve for their business challenges, even with just, keyword-oriented, social, organic, search engine-oriented marketing as well? But being very clear and understanding their habits, their pain points, their preferences, and spending the time to really make sure that you're getting in the mind of that specific profile. And the thing that I find really important here, and where I see a lot of copywriting going wrong working with clients actively, even those that are copywriters for their clients, it becomes very much a challenge for them to write copy that isn't just buy something from me oriented, right? Where it's too much sales too fast and not having spent enough time building authority and relationship with that person. The thing that I always look at is two things whenever copy is being written. One is that I am writing to a person. I will have a specific client. I will have a specific person. I'll have a specific prospect that I am writing to so that I'm able to put myself into their shoes, the feelings that they have, the mindset that they find themselves in, the pain that they really find themselves in. And it does a couple of things. One, it allows for me to be able to assume rapport when I'm writing copy because I'm writing to an individual. It allows for me to be able to speak to them in a more emotional language because I'm speaking to that individual. And then it ends up working in an incredible fashion because the frequency by which that we end up hearing that our own marketing, from YouTube videos to the podcast that you're listening to now, to our emails that we're sending out, that it felt like it was written specifically for them. Well, in theory, it kind of was, but it truly, actually, the person we were writing to wasn't that specific individual. And the reason why it felt that way was because we were writing to the emotional place that that person was in. And while the pain points and the scenarios are largely very similar across our ideal clients, and the same is true for you, is making sure that you're speaking to someone assuming that rapport, that you're speaking to someone assuming that relationship, and they will assume the relationship back. Now, the thing that I want to hit on next, right, is that as we start to get into identifying the channel selection, I want to have a clear understanding of what it actually looks like for you specifically. When I think about marketing channels, I think about them in essentially three different buckets. You've got short-term lead generation, you've got mid-term lead generation, and then long-term lead generation. So short-term is going to be anything between like 90 days and less than 6 months. Mid-term is going to be anything 6 months to 18 months. And then the long-term is going to be 18 months plus. And realizing that each one of these different marketing channels, that there are different timelines to being able to get to the volume that you're looking for to be able to have the impact. And so here's the thing that I want you to be thinking about is, depending on the channel, I want us to be understanding a couple of pieces of information. So the first of which is, what can I afford to acquire a client? And sorry that I'm going to break into some math here for a moment, but I want to have an understanding of what can I actually afford to acquire a client. So if I look at my financial prospectus, my budgets and everything, and just as a general rule, we're going to say that you should be spending somewhere in the 8, 12%, 15% absolute highest number in as a percentage of revenue. So here's the actual revenue that I need to be driving. Here's the goal objective this year. And here's my marketing revenue. Understanding both in hours and in dollars, what can I afford to spend? So if I were to take the total hours of my agency overall, what does it actually cost me to operate the agency hour by hour? And that has an intrinsic cost built into it, whether that's you doing those hours that could be spent somewhere else in billable work, or it's a team member that's doing and investing those hours. And so understanding what that cost actually has, then understanding exactly what you can afford to acquire a customer for. So if you were to take the total amount of revenue that you currently have right now, and you were to assume an 8% or 5% or whatever you're willing to invest into marketing, what is that number? And so now you have a clear understanding of what that actually looks like. And then you take your average client value as well of the over the course of time. So if it's, you want to look at it in just that first year, here's the amount of money that I can afford to pay to acquire a client. And then understanding your own sales dynamic. And I want to inject something in here because there's a piece of nuance, is that if you right now are entirely referral based, and I hear this all the time, it's like, we're great at closing, and you are likely because you're predominantly referral based. And when you're generating cold leads or leads that don't actually know you or don't have the transference of authority from a friend or colleague that is making that recommendation, your closure rates are going to be impacted by it. It's a fact. It's going to happen. And so you need to assume that your conversion rates are going to be lesser here. At the highest point that I would be assuming in your base kind of assumption is a 25% conversion rate. So whatever that number is, you then need to essentially divide it by 4 or 5 to understand what you can afford to derive an opportunity. And then understanding exactly what it would cost you to drive an actual lead. And the distinction is that a lead isn't a phone number or a contact email or whatever, right? It isn't a name. A lead to me is more of a person that you're actually speaking to. And so 1 in 5, 1 in 4 is the typical kind of percentage that you should be. And if you're not able to convert at that rate, then we have a positioning problem. And that's a different episode to talk about. So what can you afford to acquire a customer at? And then understanding exactly what you expect from an ROI perspective. And each channel has different KPIs that you can expect an amount of ROI to be able to derive from that, and understanding the benchmarks for that specific channel, but also understanding for you of what that ROI needs to be for you specifically. And making sure that you're thinking about this in the context of, for us as an example, right? Our average lifetime value of a client is about the average lifetime, not value, of a client is, 3 years into 5. And understanding that for us, we have the financial reserves that allow for us to be able to afford to acquire a customer and then take a longer bit of time in order for us to get to profitability with that client. It's not a problem for us because we have the built up financial reserves. And what amount of time can you take in order it actually takes for you to be able to break even on that relationship and the amount of money and time that you're spending in acquiring the client? And this is where a lot of people end up going wrong in marketing, is that if you do not have the amount of financial reserves that it takes you, 3, 6, even 12 months to be able to acquire a client, and you're investing for that period of time before you actually get the impact, it can be pretty disastrous. And so understanding what that timeline to ROI. And so as I was talking about that short term, midterm, long term, short term tends to be more outbound oriented, really being able to be in front of those individuals. So it's your existing referral networks, it's your own existing network, it is more cold email, it may be LinkedIn outreach, it may be going to events and community networking oriented events. But those are going to be things that you're going to be able to generate leads typically in less than 6 months. The midterm, it tends to be more your social media oriented, it tends to be more ad content, it tends to be more PR oriented, a little bit more edging towards the inbound marketing strategy really is where midterm, it's this like kind of cross between the outbound outreach and the inbound. And then long term is going to be your SEO. It can be social media, depending on the amount of following that you currently have, more organic oriented mechanisms. And even speaking can be longer term, depending on whether you have the platform or the relationships to be able to start to get speaking engagements in the short term. So I want you to think about the short term, midterm, long term is what is the actual amount of time that it will typically take in order for you to get to a relative number of scale within this type of marketing channel. And what can I afford from a timeline perspective? Is that in order for me to be able to bring the revenue in that I'm needing in the next 3 to 6 months, do I have enough leads that's coming in right now for me to maintain the business as well as hit my goals in the short term? If you are, and you do have that, great, then we can start to look at longer term channels to allow for us to be able to drive those leads. If you don't, then we need to focus our attention on the shorter term channels, making sure that you're able to actually bring in the leads that you're looking for, because it doesn't make sense that if you do not have the leads that you need today in order for you to be able to hit your goals and even just cover your cost of running the business today, then going about a SEO organic social media oriented strategy, a content strategy, is not going to be the route that is going to be useful for you. And so just being very clear when you're going into your strategy planning of exactly where you are focusing your time and attention. Be very clear of what you can afford to spend in hours or dollars to be able to acquire a client, and understanding exactly where you are. One of the things that's really important to just kind of hit, that at least the way that I look at it, is that anytime I'm going down a new strategy, I always start with, here's the amount of time that I'm going to give this strategy at the upfront. Here's the amount that I'm willing to invest in this strategy to see whether it's working. And then here's the minimum output that I'm willing to determine that if I don't hit this output in this specific amount of time, then I'm going to cut it off. But if I'm within this number and this number, great, then I'm going to continue on with the test. And if I hit this higher end KPI, that means that I'm going to increase the amount of spend or hours or investment into this specific channel. And the reason I'm saying this is that I want to avoid both overinvestment and underinvestment for you, because the expectation that we go into things, largely just as human beings, we want things now. We don't want to wait for things, me included. And it's important to understand that things do take time, and that you're not going to have the impact largely tomorrow that you want it to be. You're not going to end up doing that much impact. It's possible, but generally speaking, it's not how it works. Life does take work, and business does take work. And otherwise, everyone would be a business owner and would be being exactly where you stand right now. So making sure that you're going into it and understanding of that you don't want to be overinvesting, but you also don't want to be underinvesting. And one of the number one challenges, aside from not doing any marketing at all, that I see when it comes to agency owners is that they will not stay consistent in their own lead generation efforts, and they will give up too fast. Some of it may have been that they just were doing the wrong channel in the first place that ultimately wasn't going to have the impact that they were looking for, and so it just actually doesn't work, or they just didn't give it enough time. The final piece that I'm going to leave you with here is where we ultimately started, is that you want to kind of start small, making sure that you're testing and being very clear of your marketing efforts. You want to make sure that you obviously have enough of a data set to get statistical significance in what it is that you're testing, but you do actually want to test in your marketing. You do want to make sure that your messaging is working. You want to put it out there and start to look at each different little piece. The power is in the numbers in your marketing strategy. Continually looking at the data, refining how you're going about it, refining your messaging, and allowing for you to be able to get to a significant amount of scale. Choosing the right marketing channel is as much about the strategy as it is about understanding your audience. It's about focusing where your ideal client spends their time, making sure that their eyeballs are already there, developing that clear persona, aligning your budget with realistic ROI timelines, expectations, and maximizing your efforts to drive better results. Remember, this isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right things and doing them well. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening in today. With all of the shifts in the industry, it is easy to feel overwhelmed or unsure of your next move. So I'm not here to try to sell you anything. I just want to give back and guide you through the uncertainty. Whether you're navigating new trends or just need some clarity, we're here to listen and offer advice. Head to creativeagencysuccess.com/chat to book a free 15-minute chat with an agency mentor who can provide you with a fresh perspective. Let's figure out the best steps for your agency's growth together.